Dave, I was ordering from my favorite pizza place this past week, and because, I am a health-conscious man in my 50s, I decided to get a little side salad. Dave, have you ever seen anything as sad as a pizza place side salad? It's always a bunch of wilted iceberg lettuce, one thin little slice of onion maybe, and a carrot that's been sliced so thin it's translucent. If you get a cherry tomato in there, which I pick out, by the way, but if you do get a cherry tomato in there, you run to the window and shout hallelujah. That's a lucky day you get a cherry tomato. There's nothing sadder than a pizza place side salad.
Nothing says delicious like lettuce that's been sitting next to a 1,000-degree oven for hours on end and then brought to your door by a stoner. Nothing says delicious like that salad. Crisp, cool, refreshing. I mean, listen, the entire panoply of everybody in the world over loves pizza. Yeah. Amazing food, right? You order it hot, fresh, delicious. But any of the side foods from a pizza place are the nasty. Brad, let's just talk about the breadsticks from a pizza place. I mean, those are the sad scraps of pizza dough left from around rolling the first one. And then, with a little extra spit in there, and they roll it up and then throw some garlic on it. Bam, zoom, there's your garlic stick. That's
just a store owner who did not want to waste one more iota of profit that might be going out their window. As a matter of fact, funny you mentioned that. Where I went to college, and I don't know that this is true, so before I besmirch anyone, there were stories about a pizza place in that general area that had pizza that I still crave to this day. Amazing pizza. And the rumor was, and again, unsubstantiated, was what made it so good is that the guy took some of the crust and stuff that wasn't used and ground it up and put it back into the sauce.
No.
And I'm like, I have no idea how truthful it was, but I got news for you, Dave. Even if it was true, which let's face it, in college it was probably a rumor. Even if it was true, I'd go back and order that pizza.
It was delicious.
It was so good. It was so good.
It's like the snake eating its own tail, though. When you're grounding a pizza into a pizza, it's like you know how British farmers got a mad cow disease by feeding cows to other cows.
Yes.
Like when you're grounding old pizza into new, what are we even doing anymore?
Whatever they were doing it right.
Yeah, I guess. On that note, everybody, I'm going to say hello, everybody. Welcome to ComicLab, the show about comics being rolled into old comics and making comics.
And making a brand new living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of the Webcomics Handbook on Substack and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, not yet on Substack. We'll talk about that today. Cartoonist at Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/ComicLab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. And we will get into why I have not yet launched on Substack today. And it's not for any malevolent reason. I just have a couple of big career things going on at the moment. And, you do kind of need dedication of mind to do a new launch of anything. So I just kind of need a clear 2 weeks to do it. So anyway, that's the short answer on that. But before we start today's show, I just want to tell you guys, if you remember, we're going for 500 for 50, which is I want to get 500 patrons for my 50th birthday. And we're getting really close. Brad, I'm so excited for it. So tell folks what to get when we get to 500.
When we get to 500 backers on Patreon, 500 paid backers, we will do 2 episodes of Drunk Comic Lab. Now, this is a tradition that goes back quite a bit. And to be honest with you,
you make it sound like it's an old Christmas tradition. Okay, kids, let's gather around the tree.
Well, it's time for Brad and Dave to get drunk. They are some of our best shows because as the drinking commences, we start telling stories that we would be much too shy, much too smart smart to tell in public otherwise. In fact, this is why it's a Patreon exclusive, so we can limit the number of people that hear what we're about to say, because invariably we start talking tales out of school. And it started out as Drunk Comic Lab, just one. But what happens is after the first show, we've got such a head of steam after the first hour. We're like, let's do another one. And another drink gets poured, and we do the second one, Drunker Comic Lab, which is even more off the chains than the first one. So if we get to 500, and I want to get there before the end of August, because Dave and I are both going to be in San Diego for the NCS convention, the Reuben Week. If we can record this together out at the Reuben Week, I think it would be even. Could you imagine, Dave, you and I posting up at the hotel bar?
It'll be
out
delightful
there with our microphones.
It'll be delightful. And honestly, I want people to know we get questions every week into the show, right? And Brad does a wonderful job of sorting them all. There's probably a half dozen that both Brad and I go, ooh, we're saving this question for Drunk Comic Lab because it's going to elicit such better responses when we've had a few beers than if we do it on a normal show. So join us over at patreon.com/ComicLab. You will get 300 plus episodes that you've never heard before of pro tips, which goes out exclusively to Patreon backers. You'll get access to the Discord server, which is an amazing resource for pros and pro-am cartoonists sharing best practices. And when we get to 500, you're going to get pro tip, or you're going to get the Drunk Comic Lab pro tip that goes out exclusively to Comic Lab backers.
Absolutely. So, Dave, let's start off with our first question from one of our comics community over there on Patreon, James, who says, I am enjoying the shows and recently listened to the show talking about Substack. I have enjoyed growth there, but I'm concerned about how to bring in new subscribers who are not on Substack. How do I bring them in once I leave MailChimp? A landing page? I'm sure you guys have some ideas about how to do this. And by the way, I did touch base with James and confirm that he was using the one thing or the thing that, and I said, James, what are you doing on MailChimp right now that's working for you? And he says that he was using MailChimp's landing page feature. So we've got that to go on. But James is concerned about growth on Substack.
This is a great question. I would also be concerned about growth. Yes.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, I want to say as a huge shout out, Brad has set up a whole sub Discord. I don't know what's the term for the sub Discord, like a folder, a file, what do you call it?
It's a channel.
Listen to Grandpa describe the internet. Brad has set up a whole channel in the Patreon Discord specifically for Substack talk. So, my God, I can't talk today. So, if you get in on patreon.com/ComicLab, you can get all of the Substack pro tips right there on that channel. But yes, I also want to know this question, Brad, because I will be setting up Substack probably at the end of August after my my big drive Kickstarter goes. Well, that might be September. In September, I'll probably do it. So tell the world, what are some strategies for Substack? Are they unique and different from other social media platforms, Brad?
That's actually the headline. I've got a whole list of things that I've got notes that I want to talk about here. But the headline is everything that you did, especially if you had a MailChimp, everything that you did to get signups on MailChimp or any other newsletter is exactly what you're going to do to get signups for Substack. It's not a different thing. Substack has some things that you're going to add on to your list of tricks, but everything that you did, you're still going to do. You're just going to point them to that Substack page.
I mean, this as a not yet Substack user, it seems to me that this is the intuitive way that we have learned from 20 years of blogging and of social media, which is that the 4 C's work. The constant the sharing of high quality work works. So I'm excited that this is still the same truth for Substack, because it's a little bit what's old is new again, just another platform, right? Am I right in guessing this? That's what you're finding on Substack?
Not only that, but it's a good reminder that there's no such thing as wasted time. Like, let's say that like I felt very much like I had wasted my time on MailChimp because I looked back over the last year that I used it, and I only got 5 signups over the entire year. Only 5 people had joined that email newsletter list.
Oh, wow.
And I felt, geez, I really wasted my time there.
Right.
But what I found was everything that I learned in implementing and strategizing people to get onto my MailChimp, everything that I used and learned there, it applied directly to Substack. The difference was for me that all of a sudden it was working. When all that stuff that I did on MailChimp that got me 5, got me hundreds by the time I was fully implementing everything on Substack. So we're going to start out with that level of everything that you used on Substack, on MailChimp, you're going to use on Substack. For example, first thing I'm going to tell you is that it's got an embeddable sign up widget, just like MailChimp did.
Oh, does it really? Okay.
Yes. In fact, it's right there at the top of my Evil Link page. If you go over to their settings page. Oh, and by the way, shout out to how Substack has their settings pages set up. In other words, this is your dashboard. This is where you make all your chances. At the very top of settings is a search function. I don't know that I've seen this in any other platform. I'd like Patreon to take a page from this book.
Almost like an app. Like you can search where the things are.
So like, if you're like, okay, in fact, this is what I did to prepare for this part. Because I couldn't remember what little subcategory it was. So I just put signups in the search. Boom. It put me right to this information I'm going to give you next, which is it's under settings, under import. And then there's a little thing there that says embed sign up form on other websites. And then boom, you've got a little iframe bit of code that you slap into your website, and then you've got a workable sign-up widget that you put right up on your website.
Okay, first of all, that's amazing. But also, it's just amazing that Substack has a workable and single source settings area because, just to remind everybody, I love Patreon. Patreon is my go-to for my career. But and I know a few people from Patreon corporate listen to this show. So I just want to say, when you redesign the site, can we please have a one-stop shop for where all the settings are for a creator? Because right now, some of them are at the bottom left where my little Dave Kellett or Drive thing is, right?
Yep.
Some of them are on the left-hand side. Some of them are on the 3 dots or on the hamburger menu. Yep. The settings are scattered all over that site. And it's, don't get me wrong, I love what Patreon does for my career.
Yes.
The settings are bonkers. Whoever designed the UI for that. They're everywhere. Yeah. They're everywhere. Yeah.
It's getting, I'm the same way. I love Patreon. It's getting to feel like being a Chicago Cubs fan, though. You know, you love them to death. You know, they're not getting to the World Series, but you'll love them anyway. Oh, come on. But yes, all the settings are right there, and you can search. If you're not sure where to find it, you can do a search.
I mean, let me say this again, as someone who has not yet jumped onto Substack. One of the reasons why I am, even if I never jump onto Substack, one of the reasons why I'm excited they exist as a paid-for content platform is they are going to force my much beloved Patreon to innovate. Yes. I think Patreon kind of stopped innovating for a little bit. You know what I mean? Yep. In their push for growth, they stopped innovating. And Substack, as Brad has said, at that long show that you should absolutely go back and listen to, has started innovating. And so regardless of where I net out on using or not using Substack, I'm glad they exist because competition is good in a capitalist system. And this will be great for all of us as artists online.
Yep. So that's my first thing on my list. Get that sign up widget, put it on your website. Yep. Number two, James said, hey, I've been using the landing page. And Substack has a built-in landing page. It's your main Substack page. Now, take a little bit of time with this, okay? There's a few things I want you to think about. Number one, they've got a few preset designs that you can do, and you should choose one of those and then think about how you're going to implement them. But also, Substack enables you to pin a certain number of posts so that they appear on that landing page, right? Of course, the default is the most recent thing you post is going to appear on the landing page, but you can pin certain posts on your landing page. Now, this is how you're going to fine-tune that landing page and make it do what you want it to do. If you remember not too long ago, my advice for anybody starting any kind of a new platform was to spend the first 3 or 4 weeks just observing, right? Just watching.
Right.
And so that's what I did on Substack for quite a while. And what I heard people say over and over was a hero post. Have you ever heard about this, Dave? A hero post?
Basically, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, basically, what that is this is why I'm here. It's your explainer. It's like, this is my statement to the world. This is what my outreach is.
And some people use it with their sort of best of. Some people use it with the sort of, like you said, statement or a version of a bio of what I'm about, what I do, what you'll see here. Right?
Yep. And what I put there, it was something that I did not too long ago when I was basically buying a little bit of time to get some more writing in on my next chapter. I did kind of like a summary. I took my own advice from the show because I've said so often that you need a good about page for your website. And mine has stunk for years. And so I wanted something that a new reader could come in, get a sense of who the main characters are, what are the main storylines. And so I did a series of comics that did exactly that. It was like an introduction to a new reader. And I put all of those comics together in one Substack post. That is the main hero post of the Evil Inc. Substack, right? Which is, by the way, evilinc.substack.com if you want to go check it out.
What was that again, Brad?
evilinc.substack.com.
And if I were to say that with an accent, what would it sound like?
evilinc.substack.com.
Wait a minute. I was trying to help you out by getting it a repetition, but wait a minute. What was that accent? That was a little bit of French, a little bit of RP British. Well, I don't know what that was.
That was absolute French. That was right out of France. If you go down the street with a baguette, you'll hear people like that talking left and right.
That was a Parisian walking down the streets with a beret. Okay. Yes. I invite everyone to hit the 30-second back button on your iPod listener there.
evilinc.substack.com.
It becomes the British ambassador to Uruguay. I don't know what that was at the end. What was that accent? Oh, God, that was the best question I've ever asked you. Okay, keep going. I'm so sorry.
So I've got my hero post, which is basically an introduction. Then I've got a couple other posts that are... now stop laughing at me.
I'm still laughing, sorry.
I've got a couple other things that are posted there. Like, for example, when I did a post about my 24th anniversary of cartooning that had a lot of best of stuff, that's there. An interview where I talked about my first job as a newspaper cartoonist doing comics and stuff at newspapers. That interview is there. So, and then the next two things that you'll see is whatever the most recent things that I posted. That's all your landing page. Put a little bit of thought into what you're pinning, into what you're posting there. Just don't let it go to random, because when you send somebody to your Substack page, the first thing they're going to see is a sign up where it says, hey, would you like to sign up to subscribe to this Substack? You can sign up for free if you'd like. And by the way, this is a good thing. You want to keep this active. There is a setting that you can use to turn it off. I don't recommend that at all. Okay. I want you to keep that on, because the whole reason you're on Substack is to get people to sign up for that email. So you want that. And at the bottom, there's a little link that says no thanks. And if the person doesn't want to sign up, they click to no thanks and they go right to your landing page. Okay. It's very simple.
And what are the best versions of the language? Because I've seen modifications of that you've seen.
Yeah.
In terms of, because I know you did active viewing for a while there of different ways of doing it. What were some of your favorites?
I like no thanks, but you could just say things like take me to the page, maybe later, stuff like that. I thought no thanks kind of did the trick. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right. I wasn't sure if you had other ones that caught your eye, because I've seen some that are a little passive aggressive. And I'll be honest, as someone who is checking out someone new, I didn't like that approach, you know?
Yeah.
You want to win them over, I think, with joy rather than passive aggressiveness.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I have seen a couple. I'm trying to remember what the wording was, but I remember getting that same feeling. Like it was kind of a little bit sassy. Yeah, in a negative way.
Yeah, and it's like,
this isn't what I wanted out of you.
Exactly. I'm sorry. So keep going, though.
So yeah, you just put some thought into that landing page. Don't turn the automatic sign up form off. You want that to be the first thing that they see, because again, that's the whole point of Substack. That's why you're sending them there,
Right.
and it's very easy enough to bypass it and get to the landing page. And in fact, I've said in the past where I kind of hate when a website, you're on the website for 8 seconds and then that thing pops up.
I hate that.
See, it's weird. I hate that. I don't hate this, right?
Really?
Because
Okay.
it's the first thing you see. And it's like, so okay, if I want to get to the page, I've got to go past that. But the going to the website and then having the pop-up is like a bait and switch.
I know.
You know what I mean? I have a hard time conceptualizing it, but that's I don't mind the Substack approach. I do mind the surprise, you're signing up now approach.
Right. Can I ask you this? Is there a way to modify the time or location of when it pops up or when that presents?
It automatically presents first. Like as soon as the person gets there.
So there's no way to say like if they do 2 scrolls, then you present, or if they do.
As far as I know, I haven't seen that setting.
Gotcha. Because I know like CS5 allows for stuff like that. So I was curious if, because some cartoonists do that well. Like, hey, I see you've now gone through 4 of my comics pages.
Right.
Would you like to do X, Y, Z? And that I feel like gives somebody the taster's choice of like, oh, I see what I'm getting here. But I get it. There's still limited ability in terms of when it can pop up. All right, that's fine. Keep going.
Yeah. Number 3 thing, once you've gone through the sign up widget and getting your landing page all set up, number 3 thing I want to talk about is incentives. I'm a big fan of offering incentives for people to sign up. And this can be something as simple as offering a free e-comic. Right. Mm-hmm. In fact, what I've been doing lately on my social media outreach, my outreach has been I've used social media against itself when I'm sharing my comic, because I do a storyline driven comic. Right. Mm-hmm. And as much as I try to make sure that each one of those updates has as much standalone power as it can possibly have, the plain fact is sometimes people are going to come into an update and have no idea what's going on. So I use social media against itself, where I say, if you don't know what's happening, you've been missing updates. And here's how we're going to fix it.
I have long thought that was very clever. Yes.
Yeah, because it uses social media against itself. So
it also uses FOMO, which is an amazing technique.
Yes.
Not in a mean way, not in a weird way, but just like really quiet. Like, hey, do you not quite know where we are here? Well, maybe you've been missing out. I think it's very clever.
Here's how you can fix that. Yeah. And what I do is I also say that when you sign up, not if, but when you sign up to my newsletter, I actually have 2 free e-comics, the 2 most recent storylines or the 2 most recent chapters of Evil Inc. I'll send them both of those to help you catch up. Right? Because you've been missing out.
That's very nice.
So these 2 e-comics are going to help you catch up. Right?
Yes.
Can't get better than that. No skin off my nose. What am I going to sell these e-comics for 99 cents a piece? I'd just as soon give them away if they're going to mean that you sign up and become a more active part of my community. That's money well spent.
Can I tell you, as a friend, sometimes I hear things that you do that imply a lot of background work that I'm always impressed by. And I just want to say out loud that are you putting these ebooks together as a sort of pre-InDesign file for your eventual book? Or like, how do you do this and not drown in work for yourself?
And this is something that has come up because you don't know the half of it.
Okay.
Not only am I doing what so when I say e-comic, you are envisioning, I'm sure, a full page of comics and then another full page of comics in like an e-book that you read page by page.
Yes, that's what
I do offer.
Okay.
But I'm also doing an e-comic that is a full vertical scroll, panel by panel.
Oh my God, you're uploading all the individual panels? Oh, geez.
Yes. Which, by the way, I've got a system for it's actually not. It takes me a couple minutes because I'm preparing all my comics in a panel by panel scroll anyway, so that I can share them properly on my own web responsive website, and on my social media and on Patreon. So I've got all this stuff done anyway. All I've got to do now is select all those panels, drag them into Adobe Acrobat.
Oh, Acrobat. Okay.
Yeah. Right. I assemble them as a PDF and I have them all as the same width.
Wow.
So that, because every now and again, I used to get, if I didn't have the same width, somebody was opening this thing on their desktop, like if they were having trouble reading, right? Sure. Their eyes aren't good. So, one of them would be really wide and then, so I had to get all of my widths right. So it made me be more consistent, which was probably a good thing. But I just drag them all into Acrobat, say, assemble this into one big PDF, and then I've got a smartphone-enabled ebook that you can read on a small screen in a continuous scroll.
Okay, so first of all, what a lovely thing to give to people when they jump in on Substack.
Yeah.
But again, background info between my friend Brad and I.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get glimpses of just how much work you do in an average week. Like, I don't know if you remember this, but years ago, Brad used to offer wallpapers and screensavers, and he would produce them all in like 40 different size ratios. Like I'm not kidding about this, like 40 different ratios for every screen size imaginable. Yes. And I would sit there and go, why? Why are you doing all this work? But it worked for you clearly, and you found it worthwhile. Yeah. And so seeing how you put together this ebook is in Acrobat.
It's not that much work. I've got it all done. It's literally just assembling it all, dragging it all over.
I know that like you and I have both sliced up our comics for the web. So that's already done. Sometimes I just want to pause and say I'm in awe of my friend for all the work that he does. Sometimes I get the inclination that like you're working 40 times more than I'm working, and I don't know how you're doing it.
Oh, and the bad news is I'm still doing those dumb desktop wallpapers and stuff. I'm still doing them.
No, Brad.
Because honestly, I can get them done in about 10, 20 minutes. And it's like an automatic thing that my Patreon backers get at the beginning of the month that I still get comments on that. Like, here's how I know people are using them. If I skip a size or if I screw something up, I hear about it immediately.
Do you really? Okay.
They're using and even to the extent that there was one guy 6 months ago who must have been either a double wide screen or even a triple wide screen. Judging by the aspect ratio he gave me, it was like 3 times the width of a normal monitor.
I saw those at Costco, by the way. They're like $800. They're ridiculously wide. Yeah.
And he's like, here's the aspect ratio I need. And I'm like, I'm doing this for one guy out of hundreds.
This is what I mean.
And he left 3 months ago, and I'm still doing it.
I know. And part of that is just the Catholic Guild. Brad's like, I can't stop now. I've been doing it for 20 years. I gotta keep making it. What happens if
he comes back? I want to sitting there waiting for him, I don't want to have to get that email. So it is something that it's one of those things, and I'll cop to this. I'll cop to this. It's something I do because I've always done. Which maybe is not the smartest business move, but it's something I do because I always done.
All of this to say, though, in the context of our current Substack conversation, is I'm always impressed by how you go the extra mile for your readers. And I am serious about that as a friend.
I appreciate that.
Is that you really do. If you're a fan of Brad Geiger, you really should check out his Patreon because he goes above and beyond in a way. Like I try to post on Drive 2 to 3 times a week. Brad like 17 things a day, and like I don't know how he does it.
My goal is between 25 and 32 posts a week.
God bless America.
A month.
How do you do that?
I'll tell you why. Because last month somebody left their exit survey that I wasn't posting enough.
No,
and they said
I will hunt them down. Who said that?
They said the quote was something like 30 posts a week, huh? ? And I'm like, motherfucker, I posted like 26, 27 times, 20 different, by the way, not for nothing, good stuff.
Yeah.
But part of that is part of that is, if I'm being honest, if I'm really looking in the mirror and talking to the guy I see there, it's a little bit of inferiority complex or a little bit of imposter syndrome, because my thought is, if somebody's going to be my Patreon backer for $10 a month, and that's my big, the biggest one. If they're going to do that, I want to make sure I'm giving them I don't want them for a second to think, nah, I don't know that was worth it. I want them to see an avalanche of stuff coming at them for, oh, by the way, it's not 10 anymore. It's officially 12, but I'll be saying 10 for a long time. I want them to have an avalanche. If they ever think about canceling that subscription, I want it to be a hard decision for them.
Right. No, I get that, and I respect that. And in general, I'm sorry that I somewhat derailed your Substack.
Oh, no,
but I just wanted to compliment you on your work ethic. You just have a really good work ethic. And
I appreciate
it inspires me as a friend and as a peer. I'm like, Brad's doing more. I got to do more myself. So it's good. It's good. This is why it's good to have friends that are also cartoonists, because you're like, I can yet up my game, I guess is what I'm saying, And so anyway, keep going on Substack. I apologize.
Well, I've got one more. There's just one more thing that I have in my list here, and that is everything that I said. And of course, we brushed on social media, but you should be promoting this on social media too, sending them to a landing page, or just straight up saying, here, sign up. This is a good thing. And remember, it's just a quick side note, because obviously I have so many cartoonists in every social media platform that I operate on. So many cartoonists, we struggle so much with promotion. If you're having trouble as a cartoonist, just remember, here's what I want from you out of promotion. Tell me why it's good. That's the only thing I want from you out of promotion. Don't say, would you consider signing up? Or here's something, or I need to make rent next month. If you would say, the guilt thing, just print this out and put it in your workstation where you can see. Tell me why it's good.
Let me give you some advice that I got from both Brad Geiger and from Scott Kurtz. That now, as a 50-year-old cartoonist, I'm much more able to incorporate. But as a younger cartoonist, I too struggled with being able to tell people, hey, here's a reason why it's good, and here's a reason why you should check it out. And the first bit of advice is from Brad Geiger. So this is repeating what you've heard yourselves on this show, which is, if you can't get yourself to say it's a good comic, say I'm really proud of it. There's a power to that doesn't feel braggy, and yet is very inviting to the energy behind it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It gives you a sense of like, this is something worth checking out, without you feeling braggy. So that's level one, I would say, of being able to talk about your comic. The second one I learned from Scott Kurtz, which is, and now I incorporate it, which is, once you, and it might take you a few years, once you find the confidence as a cartoonist to say it, there is incredible power to being able to say about your comic, this is a damn good comic. You should go check it out. You should read this. I say that about Drive now, that like Drive is a really good sci-fi story and you should go check it out. And I genuinely mean it. And a large part of that, and I want to give him a public shout out, is Scott teaching me that it's okay to be proud and to tell people, this is really good. You should check this out. Younger me, more insecure me, had a lot of trouble saying that. But honestly, Scott, what's the phrase? Not mirrored it, but like demonstrated how you can use that confidence in public and how powerful it is. Because so much stuff is like milquetoast, like, hey, I hope you check it out. Like Brad was saying, like, hey, if you could possibly maybe consider, and milquetoast language gets milquetoast results, but confident, strident language, people will click it. And so a shout out to Brad and a shout out to Scott about that.
Yeah. Scott modeled that for both of us.
That was the word. My God, I couldn't think of the word. Oh.
Yeah. And by the way, just going back real quick, Dave mentioned pride. The other one is joy. Those are the two things you can get away with, pride and joy. I'm proud of this, or this thing brought me joy. And it doesn't feel braggy. It comes very natural. Yep. And like Dave points out, it's got that same power. Right. So all of those things, your social media outreach should be including this as well. And now that by the way, all of that I was doing for MailChimp. I haven't said a new thing yet. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's all stuff that was MailChimp stuff. The only new thing I'm going to say for Substack specifically is to use Substack notes. Remember, Substack is two things. It's your email newsletter. That's your posts. And it's Substack Notes, which is Substack's own internal Twitter feed, if you will. It acts and reacts just like Twitter. So when you make an email newsletter post, later on that day, you should take that post and promote it in Notes, which, by the way, Substack lets you do with a push of the button. Share this on Notes, click, there it is. And now you're sharing it to that community on Notes. Now, it's going to feel, and by the way, this is because it's kind of a little bit true. It's going to feel as if the only people on Notes are other authors. Okay. That's because obviously this is Substack's internal social media. And I have to really caution you on perception. Your perception of who's interacting on Notes is who's posting on Notes. And that is mainly authors. Okay. But that's not the sum total of who's interacting. There's a lot of civilians there. You don't know they're there because they're not necessarily making posts.
They're sort of lurkers.
I'm sorry. I got to be careful about my words because posts is an email newsletter. They're not making notes on the Notes feed. I got to be careful so I don't confuse you. But take that post, that email newsletter post, promote it in Notes, and use that Notes to the extent that it should be doing. And all those 4 C's that we taught you about, you should be doing all those in Substack Notes. That means restacking other people's content, commenting on it, stuff like that. Those 4 C's work.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was going to repeat the 4 C's for anyone who might have forgotten. It's content. That means it's your new stuff, either write-ups on your part, behind the scenes, or the actual comics. That's curation. That's restacking. That's sharing other people's thoughts, both on the Substack system and from the wider world. That's commercial, which is advertising your upcoming signing or advertising your new Kickstarter or your new book or your new poster or new pin, right? And then the 4th one is kindness, which is make it fun to be there, make it an enjoyable thing, and be kind as you do all those first 3 C's. So the 4 C's, which work on every social media platform, also work on Substack. I
got to tell you, and commenting, making kind comments is a huge thing. We've got somebody who's been very active in the ComicLab Discord. His name is Travis. He does a comic called Bruno Harm. I'm watching this guy do the 4 C's on Substack Notes on a daily basis, and he's killing it. I mean, you can see. You ever see somebody take what we talk about and just do it 100% and take it very seriously? I can see him doing it, and I can see the results that he's getting. And it makes me so happy to see it out in the wild. It's like, you get it, you're doing it.
Yeah. Well, and listen, again, take a page from Brad Geiger. Remember before how I was talking about how Brad goes the extra mile with his work and he plans out 30 to 32 posts every month on Patreon. You can, if you want, plan out your 4 C's for Substack. What would that mean? What would that look like? It would mean like, okay, on a little calendar system, I'm going to do, I don't know, 5 to 15 content posts on Substack this month or on your social media. It means I'm going to do 4 commercial posts this month on Substack or your social media. It means I'm going to do, let's say, 10 restacking or retweeting of other people's curation, right, on social media. And that you're kind throughout and you're commenting throughout on other social media. But you can plan it out. You know what I mean? You can actually calendar it out, and it will help you get to a goal by actually doing what Brad does, which is setting a goal and reaching it every month.
The bottom line is, if there's anything I want you to remember when it comes to Substack, it's 2 things. And that number 1, everything that you did for MailChimp, everything that you did for any other email newsletter, or anything that you would think logically, this is what I should do, right? Just like the idea of pointing people to email signups on your website is not rocket science, right? It should be part of your normal outreach, okay? That's what you're going to do for Substack. There's not a lot of magic. It's a lot of common sense. And then number 2 is to remember that Substack is 2 things, and to use Substack for its top efficacy, you got to use them both. You got to use the Substack posts, that's your email newsletter, and the Substack Notes, that's their social media. And you should be going back and forth. You should be posting posts in Notes, and you should be posting some of your notes in your posts. I'll go so far as to even like as our blogs have become a little bit more important lately, as websites became more important for us in the last 18 months or so. I've been giving my blog another look. I'll take those posts and you can embed them very easily with a little bit of HTML code. You can embed a note in your blog. And by the way, that gives you extra content for your blog. And if people are interested, they click on it. Guess where they're going to get taken to? Zink, right over to Substack, right? So it all works. It all works. The whole thing, Dave says, that I do a lot of stuff. There's a secret to it. I cheat. If I do one thing, I'm going to use it 5 different places.
Yeah.
I'm going to use as this one thing is just not going to be one thing. You're never going to see a post I make on Threads that I am also posting on Blue Sky and on Twitter. There's no just one thing. You do it once and then you use it as many times as you can. You get the most out of it. That's how you can get this stuff done.
Well, and also our wider advice, and this goes back for 6 years of the podcast now, is that it's akin to what we say with drawing something. Draw something once, but then get paid for it multiple ways.
Yes.
And like, I'll be on a plane flight like I'm going to be doing in 2 days. And I will draw a piece that I will put up on eBay, right? Sell it on eBay, but then I'll take the high-res scan of that, put it in the next drive book. And now I've gotten paid on one piece 2 ways. And I could also put it on a blog post or this or that. But you get the point, is that much like we say for our drawing, where, draw something once, get paid for it multiple ways. One of Brad's tricks with Substack and across the social media ecosystem, do something once, share it multiple ways.
Yes, absolutely.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
Well, Brad, we've got 3 updates for this week. And the first one I want to share with everybody is when this show goes live, July 25th to the public, I am at San Diego Comic-Con. So if you are there too, if you will be walking the floor of San Diego Comic-Con, come by booth 1228, 1228, the corner booth for Sheldon and Drive. I will be there all 5 days. I will be giving out ComicLab pins that say, "Let's Talk Comics." Mention that you're a listener to the show. Get that free high five from me that I bring, bespoke high fives that I bring every year. They're small batch, delicious bespoke high fives that I bring every year. Come say hi, get your pin. It would be a joy to see you over at booth 1228 at San Diego Comic-Con. Absolutely. And also coming up later on this August, we are going to be doing 2 live ComicLab podcast presentations at the National Cartoonist Society big event, the Reuben Awards Week. We're going to be down there in sunny San Diego in late August. If you're not a member of the NCS, we encourage you so much to sign up. They're really bringing some great stuff and some really good opportunities for networking in the cartoonist community. And everything is going to culminate with 2 big live shows down there at the Reuben Awards Week for the National Cartoonist Society. And we cannot wait. We cannot wait to share with you more details as they become available. We've got some great stuff planned. Absolutely. And then our third and final update for the week is Brad has been sharing very kindly video clips from our new Riverside podcasting platform on social media. And I just want to say it was a terrifying realization on my part that I thought I had a resting joyful face, a resting optimism face. And Brad has been sharing these clips of and very often it's like Brad making an incredible point. and you look over at the split screen, and I don't know what the hell is going on with my face. I didn't realize I had resting bee face. I look like resting surly bastard face. I thought I would be happy and optimistic in my resting face, Brad. What's going on with my face?
Well, here, some of that is my... I'm trying to get used to using the tools that Riverside has to do that better.
Sure.
And some of that split screen doesn't always work. So you're going to see some new ones coming out. There's one of them now that like the main talker, it's square instead of a 9:16.
Oh, I see.
It's going to be square.
That's
so
better.
the main talker is going to be like almost 7/8 of the screen. And then you just get the other guy in a very thin strip.
That's great.
That's going to be a little bit better.
Let's go with that format from now on.
Yeah.
Because
that's going to be our new
one.
Part of it is I've just been kind of experimenting, seeing what these different things can do. I'm really excited by a lot of like those captions and stuff. That's all automatically created.
Yeah, this is where Brad and I agree. The AI is working great in this respect. But I have to say, Brad's sharing these video clips where he's making an incredible point, and then you're like, oh, let's glance over and see what Dave's doing. What's happening over there? And I don't know if Brad is like intentionally grabbing clips where I look like a jackass. Like it's like second knuckle up my nose. I don't know what he's doing. Like, why did you grab this or that clip? What's going on?
You just don't notice. There's the same number of times that I'm scratching my ear or, clearly belching off mic,
So everyone check out Brad's social media feeds for a video of like Dave looking like a silverback gorilla that's staring off into the middle distance. I don't know what my face is doing in those video clips, but there we go.
When you said we've got 3 updates, I'm like, what's the 3rd update? What could he be talking about? Oh, well, I am sorry. I'm trying to get better at editing those things.
No,
I'm
it's great.
slowly
I love
getting
it.
there.
Listen, it's like Brad always, when we talked about during the Father's Day episode, practice humility and practice being able to laugh at yourself. I love to be able to laugh at myself. I'm like, look at that jackass on that video. What is he doing? What am I doing in that? What is ridiculous? Because we're all ridiculous humans going through this life. It's good to be able to laugh at yourself. So anyway, I do want to jump into the second half of the show here with a question that really caught my eye because it's something that I take great interest in terms of the power of lettering in a comic. So this question comes in over at patreon.com/ComicLab from Insomniac Overlord. And they write in, I'm looking to add some otherworldliness to my comic by including signs that are clear but unreadable by being in a fake alphabet. I have fonts that mimic text into bars and some that type out squiggles that imply text, but that won't cut it here. There's Blambot's font called Xenotribal and We Come in Peace. Those are both font names, which are great for dialogue you can't understand, but wouldn't really cut it for a bus stop. What do you search to find such a thing? Any to recommend, or is just a rabbit hole not worth going down when a sign could say shoes instead? So, Brad, before I jump into it, I wanted to get your thoughts on lettering for nonsense.
I have no thoughts. This is something that has not come up in my writing because I don't do a whole lot of like alien languages or anything like that. So I'm going to lean on you for this segment. I don't have a lot to offer in this in that whole regard.
Okay. Well, I actually have a fair amount of thoughts. First, for real world comics, i.e. comics taking place in a simulacrum of real life versus comics in a fantasy setting or a sci-fi setting. So we'll talk about that separately in a minute. But I want to make an argument that it is actually more distracting and in some ways is sort of a Chekhov's gun to have undecipherable but very clear lettering in the background of a sign like a bus stop or a stop sign or school or store. I would argue, because I see what you're going here, if you want it to be something that helps ground the space or remind you of what kind of space you're in. Like I'm standing underneath a bus stop sign or I'm standing in a supermarket for this scene, right? But you don't want that text to pull away from what your primary read is, which is the text, the secondary read, which is the character's motion, and then the third read, which is the setting itself. So you don't want that text to be fighting the primary text, the dialogue text, right? And I get that. That's actually a really good impulse. So you're coming from a really strong place. But I want to argue that the better way to do this might be to learn how to create incredibly faint but real language descriptions. So it would say store or library or prices on the tomatoes, but it's drawn in such an incredibly faint way that it becomes a tertiary or quaternary read. Is that the right way to say it? Quaternary? Quaternary?
I like tertiary.
So tertiary I know exists, but is it quaternary or is it quadrenary? I forget. Anyway, a little bit of language that I'll look up later in the OED and get mad at myself about. All right. So you want it to be a read that's the third or fourth thing that the mind registers when they're looking at a panel. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yeah.
And so ways you can do that is instead of a bolded font, you could have a font with your thinnest pen stroke where a lettering is done with 3 lines. Like, let's imagine we're creating a capital T. You could do 3 incredibly faint lines down, 3 incredibly faint lines across. Then it's a sign-sized font. Like, it's big and bold, but it is faint. Like, your mind registers the word library in the background, but it's really faint. Or you could, if you're drawing digitally, draw an actual font, but then put some kind of gradient map or something over there that breaks it up, beats it up a little bit. Looks like there's dust and light and distance, you know, the distance that comes with 300 feet of reading between you and the sign. There's ways to beat it up, I think. And I honestly think that that's a better way to do it than nonsense languages. I mean, based on my thought, Brad, any feedback on that before I go on to sci-fi or fantasy?
Oh, I agree 100%. I'll just add, if you're in Clip Studio and you're drawing the font or you convert it to a raster image, you can use one of their tools called thin line width, and you can actually physically thin the width of the line.
Oh,
it takes a little tweaking to get used to.
Okay,
but I use it every now and again. It's a very useful tool. So you could take something like that you hand lettered or converted some lettering into raster, and you can thin that line width, which is really kind of neat.
That's very clever.
My question for you is, before you go on to foreign language, here's one that I go back and forth. I flip-flop on this one all the time. And there's fewer and fewer times that it comes up these days. But as soon as I start talking, you know what I mean? You're drawing a scene and somebody's reading the newspaper. Now, you can either write out what that person's reading, or, you know, you can do actual text for the story in those thin little columns of type that we see in newspapers, and the headlines and the captions under the photos and all of that. Or what I often do is just scribble, scratch, maybe kind of indicate a headline with things that look like letters, but don't actually say anything. Because number one, I sit there, so every now and again, I've tried to put an actual story in there. It's like, nobody's reading this. It's too small to be read. It's like when you, a lot of times in computer art, you get into this detail that only takes up 6 square pixels worth of space that nobody could ever appreciate. So my question to you is, where, and by the way, I've done them both. I've done both of these things. Which do you do? Do you actual type in a situation like that, or scribble type?
What a great question, because you have sort of caught me out on my own lie, because there I actually do go for an iconic presentation of, but like you said, it's mainly for reasons of size. Like, who are we trying to kid here? No one's going to be reading this text, you know? So the best way I could describe what I do is, for those of us that use Microsoft Word or any word editing program, there is usually 3 or 4 buttons that let you left justify, right justify, center justify of your text. And it's drawn very iconically. It basically just shows you what a paragraph would look like if it was left justified, where the bottom paragraph has a little bit indented to the left, or right justified, bottom line has a little bit of text. You know what I mean? But it's basically just 8 lines, right? And that's what I do for newspapers, for books.
Interesting.
I do the headlines as a little thicker scribble, bip, across, and then just basically hash of column width text down the newspaper page or magazine page or novel, if it's a novel they're reading. But every once in a while, I will make a joke headline in a newspaper, you know, or a joke novel title, like Harry Potter and the low interest mortgage or something. on a book cover. But you're right. There, I do use gibberish text. So I guess I've been caught out in my own lie. I appreciate that. No, I appreciate that when we catch it in real time, because then we can correct it, which is, I wouldn't recommend doing it for signage, I don't think, although I have done that as well, now that I think about it. I recommend a really, really light hit of ink where the text is real, but it's almost indecipherably light. You're like, it's not indecipherable, it's indecipherably light in terms of either a transparency or a super light hit of line work that's actually using English. I think that's better. But and then to Brad's point, when the font or the text is so small, then you go iconic with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And luckily, we've got fewer and fewer scenes where people are reading newspapers, and the scenes that are replacing them.
I mean, it's sort of the bane of cartoonists is that everything is in this small black square now. Yes. The phone is the small black square. The newspaper is a small black square. The texting is a small black square. The internet is the small black square. There was a joy for those of us old enough to remember it in cartooning when there was an iconicity to a actual phone that you picked up, or a TV that looked like a TV, not like a black square, or you know what I mean? Like there was a joy to that I miss. I do miss that.
Well, and the replacements are such that you've almost got to write the letters out, because either that or they're just scribbles. You know, it's taken that middle ground away. It's either viewable or it isn't. You know what I mean? Because it's either a tablet or a phone. And at this point, I've got in Clip Studio about 8 or 9 different pre-drawn phones. I've got a whole setup for doing a text message exchange, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Oh, smart you!
I've got
Good
those
job. Yeah.
pre-drawn word balloons that text messaging uses, because when it comes up, then it's got to be legible, it's got to be readable, or else it's just a shimmer on a screen. You know, it took that middle ground away that newspapers had, where sometimes you'd see some people who were real detailed, like Basil Wolverton, I think, was one of these guys who loved hiding all kinds of stuff in the details. So he would be the type of person that would write out all these stories and hide in jokes in the photo captions and stuff like that. But man, that's never going to be me, you know. So I'm going to be a scribble guy, and I think that's an aesthetic decision. You know, everybody's going to decide differently. But before I take you way off track, what are your own personal approaches? Because I really want to hear this: foreign or alien languages.
Okay, so let's talk about this for a second, because we've talked about in the past, or at least I think I've talked about in the past on the show, how lettering, if it's done right, can be a reinforcement or frankly, even a further establishment of your style, your approach to the comic. It helps communicate the mood of what this comic is, right? Lettering, for lack of a different phrase, can be a silent character in your comic. It helps transmit the mood of the world, right? So your lettering is important. And so with Drive and with any fantasy comics or sci-fi comics, you will inevitably come across a species like elves or trolls or goblins, or in my case with sci-fi, you'll come across different alien species, and they will have their own tongue. And you'll need at times to show their literature or them speaking without translation, right? And it helps to improve the mood. And so I wanted to talk about a couple of strategies of how one creates a believable alien or fantasy language that visually communicates what these people are like, right?
Yeah.
So there's a couple different, we're not going to get big into the semiotics of language here and all that sort of stuff, but there are basics to go off of. And the simplest way to do it is, we are visual thinkers as cartoonists. So one way to build a language is to start with basic shapes. And I mean basic. Like, for example, Hindi has a beautiful language structure where, if you think about it from the traditional system, it was a line drawn across the top, and then the language flowed down in Hindi from the line drawn across the top, right?
Yeah.
Or Mandarin and Japanese and Korean were originally a pictographic system that slowly evolved into more symbolism system, right? And so, or romantic languages all come from more of an alphabet system. There are different ways you can build a language, but I think the most powerful one as cartoonists is to start with a visual system. So I have had languages in Drive where the entire language is based on series of circles, is based on circles. And so you can, as a visual thinker, you can think of all the different ways a circle could be divided up or displayed. So I would have solid circles, empty circles, half circles, quarter circles, circles at angles in terms of being sliced and then placed at an angle, circles with a cross through it, circles with a line through it, circles with a dot in the center. You can just see a billion variations of a circle-based language, right? I've had that. Right. I've had ones where an entire language was based on a version of a square that was more akin to a hashtag. It was like a square with light protrusions at each of the four corners, like a hashtag, as though you expanded out a hashtag, if you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Same type thing. Lines through the hashtag, hashes through the hashtag, dot in the hashtag, circle around the hashtag. You can create a whole language system. Again, like a pictographic system, I've done where there were, but to get to the point that the lettering reinforces the mood of the language, I have a specific species in Drive called philopods, and they're very poetic. They love art more than anything, even though they're great at science. They love and promote art all the time. And so their language is incredibly florid, like the way that handwriting was in the Romance periods of Northern Europe, because all these rich landed people had extra time to work on their handwriting, and it got ridiculously complicated. So that's the idea of the philopod language, is it's incredibly overly done, loopy. Like if you look at the signature of John Hancock on the Declaration of Independence, right? It's huge, it's loopy, but there's all those signatures of those folks. They're all incredibly complicated. And that's what that language is based on. A lot of loops, a lot of complication, a lot of floridness. And so what I want to get at and what I want to communicate to cartoonists today here is that when you are creating a fake language, number one, start with basic shapes. Number two, try to reinforce the mood of that species with that language. So I have one last one. I have an incredibly violent species in Drive called Teskans. You can think of them sort of like Klingons, but they're big and dumb and they're incredibly strong. And their language literally is based on scratches on a tree, right? That's how they would have communicated with each other, like, this is my land, don't come here, right? And so akin to Viking hash marks that Vikings would have made, onto, what are they called, runes, the Tescan language is kind of rune-based, but based on claws on a tree. So everything that they write looks like claws through a tree bark. And anyway, all of which to say is when you're creating fantasy languages or for sci-fi or for a swords and sorcery comics, try to have it reinforce the mood of the species or the elf or the troll that you're creating so that it's a 1-2 punch of like, oh, this feels like the world it would come from.
Oh, I love the idea of the Tescan language being claw marks. That's kind of interesting to me.
And that's kind of, I know it's unnecessary, but this is the kind of backstory that I try to create for myself is like, how would they first have written the language? Because if you think about Hindi and how it first got created, they didn't have lined paper in India in the second century. So you had to create your own line at the top of Hindi and then write downward. And that makes sense in terms of the historical development of a written language. Is like you would create your own line and then it would flow down from the top, right? And so a lot of these language structures that I try to come up with for sci-fi, I try to imagine how visually they would have done it. Why would they have done it? Like if you're a creature that is mainly violent and sublingual, you would use your claws to create marks on trees saying, don't hunt here, this is my hunting area, or I was the one that killed this person. And you would make a mark on a tree. And so that's where that came from.
Yeah, and when they have a contract in those cultures and they have a termination clause, it's really a termination clause.
And you can bet your bippy they're signing with an X. It ain't getting more complicated than that.
I think you better believe it. Well, listen, I've really enjoyed this idea about lettering and language and how you read different things. And I know we're going to pick this up again at some point. But before we do that, I've got a little bit of language I've got to read right here. Believe it or not, this says that, those claw marks there said that you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my ever-delightful friend, Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com. And don't forget to go over and see Dave right now at San Diego Comic-Con, where he is exhibiting right now at booth 1228, and get your free ComicLab pin.
Amen. And I will say the ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the ever-delightful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love ComicLab, and we know that you do, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode. Thank you so much for those 5-star reviews on Spotify. We know that it's no big deal for you to go over and do that, and it doesn't seem much to you when you're doing it, but to us, it means the world. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I will say ComicLab is made possible by your ever-increasing support over at patreon.com/ComicLab. So I will go ahead and say that twice with a little emphasis. Patreon.com/ComicLab.
At sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com. Go over there and see him right now in San Diego. And hold on, booth 1. I don't have it written down. Help me out with the booth. It's got 2 8s in it.
This is the sweetest part of friendship, is like, and don't forget his birthday, which is, oh God, what's your birthday? What's
your
it
birthday again?